I'm Cedar Eve. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to create a pattern by working on a beading loom. When you're planning your beadwork, it's always good to use graph paper. Right now I'm thinking about a design that I want to do on a loom, which would turn into a choker or bracelet or a band of some sort. On this graph paper, each square represents a different bead. So right now I'm drawing something for a loom piece that is 10 beads across. So this one is 12 beads across, so it'll be not as wide. So each square represents a different bead. Right now I'm planning where I'm gonna lay all of the pink colored beads. When you're drawing on your graph paper, you can do whatever design comes to mind. You could do letters if you wanted. If you're someone who likes to pre-plan, this is great. Other options are to just start, go with the flow, see what comes out. My pattern's a bit random just because I work intuitively. A good idea would be to label how many beads are across, so you know when you're setting up your loom how many spots to place for the beads. As you can see, I did a random pattern here. Each square on the graph paper is always going to represent one bead. And when you're doing your loom piece, you're always beading left to right. The beading loom has these teeth on either ends and these dowels on either end. And as you can see, this one's very loose, so you're gonna wanna use these little knobs that are on either end to just tighten it. And you're always gonna wanna make sure that these 3 knobs are either facing up or slightly on the side. These little pegs are what you're gonna use to tie your thread onto. So I've already gone ahead and just tied on a simple loop knot. You're gonna take your piece of thread. You're not gonna cut it from the spool. You're gonna keep it all on the spool as you're threading across, as you're setting up your loom. This is to ensure that you have enough thread. So right now I'm going to be setting up for 10 beads across because I want to make one of these designs. So you're going to want to try to find the middle row, or what you feel is as close to the middle row. You're going to bring your thread across to the other end, and you're going to try to line it up with wherever you think is the middle row on the other end. Feels about right to me. I'm gonna take your thread, you're gonna make sure that this knob is good to go, and you're gonna take your thread and you're gonna loop it around that peg. And you're gonna place it in the slot right beside. And you're gonna bring your thread all the way across to the other end, and you're gonna do the same thing on this end. That's why you wanna make sure that this is kind of on the bottom, so it's easier to wrap around. Wrap it around again, and you're just gonna do this back and forth. So you always want to build around that middle thread. So first I went to the right of it, and then when I was coming back across, I went to the left side of it. Each space is going to represent where your bead is going to lay. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. That's going to be enough to fit 4 beads across. When you're threading across, it's always a good idea to check the tautness of your thread. If it's too loose, your piece isn't going to work. It needs to be a little bit bouncy, and you can always adjust the sides of these. So I have 10 rows here. When you get to the end, you're going to, I sometimes take my thread and go under this row, and I wrap my thread around again under. And sometimes I make a loop. I'm going to pull my thread through the loop, and I'm just going to pull my thread tight. When you want to start, you're going to take a piece of thread, arm to arm's length, and you're going to come up through this first spacing, and you're just going to make a loop knot like that. You're going to pull it until it hugs that first strand on the outside, the very first strand on the outside. You're going to do this 2 or 3 times. That's going to be the stopper. You're going to take your thread, and on the other end, you're going to thread your needle, and then again, you're going to have a little tail on one end. So once your needle's threaded, you can choose your colors, and then you can start beading. Now that your loom's all set up, this is a good time to reference your drawing. So you can see I chose my colors. Seems like a pretty good match for my drawing. So right now I have my beads all on my needle. I've put them all on at the same time, and each bead corresponds with one of the squares. So you're going to take your needle and all the beads on them, and you're going to bring them all the way down to your thread until it hits that knot. You're going to take your row of beads and you're going to bring it underneath. So you're going underneath all of those rows of thread, and you're going to make sure that tail's on the outside, and you're going to try to fit all of these beads across so each bead is within the space that's provided. The first couple tries takes a little while. You might have some difficulty getting the first 2 rows on, and that's okay. And when you're taking your needle, you're going to wrap it around this end thread. Because you came under with your row of beads, you're now taking your needle and you're going on top of all of these rows of beads once you bring your needle through. So right now you should be able to see that your needle is resting on top of your threads, and you're going to pull your needle all the way through. So once you've pulled your thread all the way across, they should all lay like this. You just push them up through each space. You bring your needle, wrapping it around the first thread that's there. So because you're under, you're coming on top of it and through all of the rows through each bead. And this little tail, you can just tuck it under. And just pull across. Under, over that end piece, through the row of beads, pull all the way through, make sure it's tight, and you can see that your pattern's starting to come together. It's super important to make sure that you're always going on top of these rows of thread. You'll know right away when you've made a mistake if you haven't done that, because it's very easy to miss going on top of one of these threads. And when that happens, the bead will drop down. So you'll be able to see it right away. It's always great to work on the loom with seed beads and with delica beads. Seed beads are round. They're the ones I'm using right now. Delicas are square beads. So when you use seed beads in the delicas, they usually look a bit more uniform. So for this one, I accidentally counted backwards. You can see, so sometimes that happens and I'll just go with the flow and add it anyway because I think it'll look cool. You can always just take it off and recount it. Usually this tail gets in the way, so I like to try to remember to tuck it as I'm wrapping my thread around, so you can just trim it eventually. I don't usually trim it off right away, just in case that thread unravels. This piece is done according to this drawing, but if you want, you can continue this pattern throughout the length of the loom. So for me, I'm going to continue this piece. So once you have about 2.5 inches left of your thread, you want to think about stopping. You're going to use this tail to help tie off your thread and lock it in place before adding on another piece of thread. If you wanted to continue going across the loom to make your piece longer, or to just stop and begin a new piece. And you're going to take your needle and you're going to come through the bottom in between these two beads. You're going to bring your thread up so you create a loop, and then you're just going to put your needle through the loop so it makes a little knot, and you're going to pull tight, and that's it. So I usually do this about 2 or 3 times. Sometimes I do on one side and then I go backwards through my row of beads, and then I do the same thing on the other end, and that's it. If you want to decide that you want to continue working on your loom, you can do what you did at the very beginning when you were adding your thread on. You're going to come between these two pieces of thread. So the first hole on either end, whichever direction you're more comfortable working in. And you're just going to tie a knot. Always making sure that you have a little bit of a tail at the end. And you're going to go through your previous row. I usually just go 2 rows. Once you get to the end, you can do what you did earlier, which is come between the 2 rows of beads and make a loop, and then make a knot, and then bring your needle back a few rows like I did here. So I went back 4 rows. Once you have that done, you can cut your thread. Once the thread is cut, these 2 bars on the end of the loom, the wooden ones, you can turn them in, and then you can take the ends off the peg on both sides. And you'll probably have to cut the one end that you tied on. And then that's it, your loom piece is off of the loom. Once you're ready to attach your beaded piece to a surface, would tie a knot on both ends. So you just wrap all of the threads around your finger until you make a loop. Just pull it like that. You can take your scissors and just cut off the ends. My intention with this piece is to have it on my camera strap. So I'm gonna take some of this glue. Just gonna put a little bit of glue along the thread, and I'm gonna press it down to one side of the beadwork. Once both ends are glued down and it's dry, I'm probably gonna put it around here, and I'm gonna glue the back of this. You could also glue a band like this around a hat, on a belt. You can make it into jewelry. It could be a bracelet. On this choker I've made, I've attached leather to either ends and stuck these pieces in between. Remember to always use the same size beads so that the same width is kept across throughout the piece, so it doesn't go in and out. Remember to take your time. Happy beading!